Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wake Up Missoula. I'm your host, Scott Ramph. To wrap up 2025 with you guys, we have a special Christmas Dubbin Stuff for you guys, along with your city council as they start wrapping up the Unified Development Code. We also talk about other things that are happening this end of the year deal, where we talk about the Homeless Persons Memorial Day, which is happening tonight at 5:30 p.m. at Caris Park to honor those who have lost their lives as a result of their hard lifestyle, living on the streets, and being in those situations in general. So what happens is they bring community leadership, speakers, and folks to read off the list of folks that have lost their lives through the conditions of living outside. And so that's happening at Caris Park tonight at 5:30 till about 6:30, and MCAT's going to be recording it. Besides that, MCAT recorded a bunch of holiday concerts, and we're going to have a nice little cabaret of clips for you guys for our programs that are airing on MCAT, which you can watch online now on MCAT's YouTube page at MCAT TV Missoula. So there's a lot going on. I don't have many events I want to talk about just because we're kind of like going to be taking a hiatus for the next 2 weeks. You're going to be enjoying my compilation of Dubbin Stuff for the next 2 weeks. I have over 2 hours worth of footage just in general of all the Dubbin Stuff I do every week. So I always have fun doing that, and it's going to be posted on my YouTube channel, Wake Up Missoula. All right, enough of that stuff. We're going to talk about some city council stuff as we jump right in. Let's kick things off. The city recognized the Homeless Persons Memorial Day, like I said, and Andrea Davis spoke on behalf of that and talked a little bit more about that.
Folks who have lost their lives while being homeless on this coming Friday, December 19th, 2025. This will take place down at Caris Park, and it will be under the pavilion there from 5:30 until 6:30 p.m. And I will also mention that because there's been much conversation here at the council level, thank you so much, addressing houselessness. We are really proud to have the resource guide that was created as part of Ordinance 1260 in terms of various resources that were afforded through that ordinance and council budget decision making, to come up with a useful resource guide, both online but also physically in person. It fits in a shirt pocket. It does have all emergency shelter, drop-in centers, free meal sites, food pantries, medical and behavioral health, showers, free laundry, day-use lockers, coordinated entry sites, special services, and sharps disposal.
And so those are the important resources people can use, especially those who become homeless new, and are available, like they said, online, citiesengagemissoula.com and beyond. So as we get further into the meeting, we go through the early parts of public comment. According to the post on Missoula events, Caris Park will hold this a service including speakers from the Paul Center, an honor song by Benji Headswift and his son, and a reading of names. Cookies and hot chocolate will be served to keep attendees warm during that time. And zoning is something that the city will be talking about through January, but during public comment, Beth Judy spoke on zoning during public comment about trees. And so this is what she had to say.
At some point in this code process, 10-foot setbacks were proposed for certain zones. If you think of a street's canopy, half of it goes into a street tree's canopy. Half of it goes into the street and the other half towards a building. On the City of Missoula's list of approved street trees, 20 out of 32 trees in the small category would fit that narrow setback, but most of those species are more like shrubs. For example, lilac, serviceberry, chokecherry, Rocky Mountain maple. The medium to large stature category, over 30 feet tall, lists 73 approved tree species. Only 4 out of 73 would fit in a 10-foot setback. Mature trees are not only valuable regarding climate for cooling and shade, but studies show they make communities safer in terms of crime and slower driving. Also, mental health, air cleaning, flood mitigation, increased healing and learning, and sense of community.
All right, and so a big part of this has to do with, because of limitations of zoning, could also limit the amount of tree options people can have moving forward when it comes to that. So those are things that definitely should be brought up, because you just never know what kind of zoning is going to prevent kinds of plantings of trees and stuff like that. And personally, trees also uproot a lot of sidewalks and require my neighborhood to pay to fix that problem. So while trees are great, they're with the relationship, but the relationship with the sidewalks can be iffy at best. And burying trees deeper does not necessarily give trees a chance to survive, because they require more surface area for water consumption. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this topic a little bit further in when we talk about land use and planning, when they're actually talking about it, because I have a lot of clips to show you from there, and I'm going to jump right along with more public comment by Katie Thompson. She's back to talk about the Midtown Commons, otherwise known as the Southgate Triangle, and this is her 2 cents on that.
And that was originally brought as a potential purchase with public funds. I think the selling point was that that would give you control over what happens there, and that there would be robust community input. That really hasn't happened. And generally we get answers that are, oh, we don't know that yet, nothing's been finalized. And so we're just kind of stuck in this limbo of not really getting answers, not really getting input. Yeah, when I went to the parks meeting, which very much seems like putting the cart in front of the horse, there were probably 8 county employees there. It was pretty impressive for the show rate, and it felt like more interactive. Okay, you're considering what the community wants. I just wish also that often we're referred back to the Midtown Master Plan or all the other studies that have been done, and it just seems like that wasn't considered by what you guys are going ahead with, which doesn't include affordable housing, which doesn't include keeping any of the nature that's there, which gives us a 1.4 acre park, which doesn't really even meet the existing population surrounding that area.
All right, and so, yeah, that was her response to just kind of what's happening there. The city purchased land through Missouri Development Agency TIF funding to help develop the area, and then ended up selling it to a developer to develop this land with the adverse effect of including a park. So the idea is that the city's input for this property that they own would be essentially to park, but a part of this also, the city of Missoula technically kind of opened a can of worms when they decided to create the Scott Street affordability project, where they do a land lease program where essentially one part of the purchases of the townhouses there go to help fund the affordable housing and keep the public land trust there. And so the city didn't seem like they wanted to make the Midtown Commons this particular thing moving forward. But at the same time, I don't think they were even motivated or even thought about doing that in the first place. You know, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that the city invested land can be used to create affordable housing. And while many people pointed to the fact that the developer was from out of state, the main point was this land is owned by the city, and no mention of affordability in the city's vocabulary on this particular project, just having the park. So while these were the public comment section, the city looked to increase fees on right-of-way sidewalks for snow and hazardous vegetation. So essentially that's up to $242 from the about $70 minimum, depending upon who has to clear the snow on the sidewalks or clear out the vegetation. It's usually when it's a complaint-driven process that if you don't clear out the area, the city will do it for you, because the sidewalks are maintained by the owner, but at the same time, they're owned by the city. So it's one of those kind of weird kind of situations where they increase those fees, and they will start next January. During the consent agenda, Christian Jordan City Council spoke about the modular bathroom being transferred to the county. So this is the final say on what they're going to do with the modular bathroom that was used at Johnson Street Shelter for showers, basic amenities like that. And, you know, they were transferring it to the county for them to use at the temporary safe outdoor space. And so here is Christian Jordan on that.
I think that by giving away the modular bathrooms, actually I think the county's paying for them, we are failing to uphold our end of the bargain in this ordinance that we have passed. And I struggle particularly because these folks are seeing increases in municipal infractions for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I wish that we would have a conversation about keeping these toilets and bathrooms and showers for our unhoused community, because there's still a significant need. And so I will not be supporting this transfer because I think we need to uphold our end of the bargain.
Okay, and part of the temporary safe outdoor space is it does represent a part of it, but not the whole lion's share of the homeless population that don't have places. Because with the TOSOS site, the temporary safe outdoor space, that one is you do have to apply to even get into that thing. So it's very much like has certain barriers to get into that area. So the modular with bathroom facilities will be transferred to that site near the Trinity Navigation Center, county run off Broadway. Last week, the city admitted to shortfalls into the SAM project. So this is the better utilizing project that's happening with the federal RAISE grants. And I'm pointing in that general direction because that's where Bear Track Bridge is and the surrounding areas around that to essentially convert a lot of the streets. The Main and Front Street conversions are the biggest part of getting the grants in the first place. So I always like to mention that too, because it's like, why do you have to convert Main and Front Street? It's like, it's fine the way it is. And then part of the grants, the $24 million, that's like the top of the list. It seems like fronted Main Street have to be converted into those two ways. So Mary McNegan, Senior Project Manager for the SAM project, talks a little bit more about some of these amendments and adaptations they have to do based on the budget. And, you know, the longer you wait to make things and develop things, the more expensive it becomes.
This contract amendment is extremely important for us to maintain our project schedule and final deliverable to FHWA to obligate the funds for construction. This approval is separate from whether or not folks agree or disagree with some of the design direction that we've given to our design team. Disagreement on those decisions is pretty natural for a project like this, and we can discuss those issues separate from this contract. But for now, we had to give some direction to our design team for what to move forward with. But we still have some time to work out the finer details. I like to compare this to, you know, building a house. We're in some ways trying to pick out the tile before we know where the wall is going to be.
All right. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're like, you know, a lot of people have a lot to say about this particular project, and they're still not at the point where they're going to 100%, since they said they're about 30, looking to get to 60% with these final amendments and moving forward and everything with that. Time is money, and the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. And so they have to reduce some of the funding mechanisms and some of the projects to be like, okay, so the guidelines are this now, and now you got to adjust for that based on making the designs based on what we're dealing with right now. So Bob Campbell, City of Missoula City Council, has been very wary of this project, like most residents who spoke during public comment section. This is what he had to say.
I thought as time passes, perhaps watch all this unfold, that would kind of acclimate to it, like an acquired taste of, you know, some food delicacy. But at the end of the day, I find myself in opposition to this project. It costs too much, reduces parking, constrains traffic, and negatively impacts businesses. At present, I'm aware there are still businesses operating in the downtown area opposed to this project for most of the same reasons I just mentioned. And now we find several of the features that were sold in the original plans are being reduced or eliminated: separated and elevated bike lanes, Ryman Street improvements, Petty Street modifications. Councilwoman Jordan mentioned stormwater infrastructure concerns, all in order to keep the project within budget despite substantial built-in funding for contingencies. Given the amount of time yet to pass until construction actually begins, I fear these overruns are only the beginning.
All right. So that was his 2 cents on that. And then Gwen Jones comes in and kind of responds to this. And among public comments, some of the safety issues off the hip strip were brought up, and bike safety. They also include 8080 ramps to Karis Park to address those needs, since phase 2 of Karis project fell short of those funding goals. Gwen Jones, City Council, reflected on this amendment and kind of like add some clarity.
First of all, the fact that this is an amendment in front of us, the word amendment sounds like there's this connotation like we didn't do it right, so now we're going to amend it and do it right. That's not true in this situation. When you have projects, big projects like this, you do the engineering in phases. So we call it an amendment, but this is the last phase to get us to 100% design. And it will include a lot of other elements like environmental assessment, geotechnical analysis, a lot of other things. So this gets us over the finish line in terms of design. And this is the crucial phase when we really drill down and figure out what we can do with the resources we have and how to make the budget work.
All right. So that was, there's just a lot going on. And in terms of that, budget constraints are often the leading cause to cutting some of those things that people latched onto. It's kind of like referring to housing prices going up by less rather than reducing altogether. A $25 million grants project has a lot of hoops to jump through. They passed the amendment to move the process along, and they'll meet January in committee meetings to discuss further the SAM project. So, speaking of which, as we're talking about committee meetings, the Land Use and Planning Committee was the lone meeting that happened on Wednesday. They're wrapping everything up, and there's still plenty to talk about with the Unified Development Code. Ross Mollenauer, city engineer, kicks off the code reform with this.
We wanted to make it really clear by adding this language here in number 2, which is really just to say that our intent for all these infrastructure improvements is to make them proportional to the scale of the development impacts. That we're not trying to require roundabouts on a backyard single unit ADU, right? That's not proportional. So we just wanted to state that really clear, and that would give us and the people, the other code users, kind of some context on our background here. So we want to make that really clear that we want things to be proportional. This also clarifies that we retain the ability to waive these requirements for small infill projects. If there's no sidewalk within a mile of your property and it's a dead end, there's a very good chance that we might waive that because there's no public benefit in requirement.
All right. So Ross Mollenauer discusses further, part of this has to do with, sidewalks, right-of-way, bike storage, and urban mixed use for regulation are up for discussion. This is getting into those specifics. Code and zonings are guardrails for developers to follow and speed up the process. As he spoke, he mentioned local leaders and developers who are also part of this process. This will help them create a standards and specification manual, which will go on to those details like pipe type, depth, various things not required by zoning, but plays a part in the approval process and infrastructure of most developments. So Ross also talks about the right-of-way easements, otherwise known as sidewalks. So let's see. Where did I put that one? Okay, here it is. Here's Ross.
And when we talk about right-of-way improvements, I think one of the questions that came up last time was, how expensive are these? We're talking about the sidewalk, the boulevard, the street trees, the curb, and sometimes on a new street, or not a new street, sorry, on an existing street, maybe there's none of that, and you're the first house that comes in, and you have to build it all, and maybe you have to survey the street just to get drainage. So that can be really expensive if you're talking about maybe you're just doing a single-family project, a backyard unit, and that cost could be, we're saying, I think we did looked at some estimates, and we're saying it's about $300 a foot of your frontage. So whatever your frontage is, that's kind of average. But if it's a corner lot, if you're a corner lot or you're the first one on your block to do it, it could be really expensive.
All right. So yeah, like any development, anything moving forward, especially if the city is pushing for more sidewalks and connectivity, you can expect prices to start going up a little bit. And, sidewalks are just weird in general of how the city of Missoula's relationship with them, because for the most part, the sidewalks are built when the developer builds the houses there. But if the houses are there before sidewalks are there, any kind of added sidewalk or project moving forward, they usually put a lien on the houses in the neighborhood. And before that, they used to do special improvement districts. And special improvement districts haven't really been used in the city of Missoula since they used Hillview Way as a major project to mitigate ice problems, especially when you're going on a slope between the intersections of Russell, Hillview Way, and I believe it's Southwest Higgins when the Higgins Road curves over. So that intersection used to be very dangerous before the last SID, and that's an example of how SIDs were used to, special improvement districts are basically like, let's target a zone and make them pay for their improvements rather than the whole lion's share of the city paying for that area. We have road districts, we got parks districts. Certain areas pay for those things to help spread it out for the city of Missoula. we don't have a sidewalks district, so this is kind of how the tools we've ended up using to help pay for it. And speaking of which, Ross also talks about some of the sidewalk issues, and this is what he had to say.
This is something we've already got in the UDC language, which I presented on before, but just as a reminder that we also have language in our code that would require replacement of anything that's hazardous. So if you are doing a development and we're out there looking at it and we see something that says, we see something like these pictures on the screen, we are going to require that those pieces be replaced.
As you can see there, it's considered hazardous infrastructure. It's the same thing that happened, in my neighborhood, and a lot of it had to do with, trees uprooting the sidewalks. Sidewalks, I want to make sure it's clear that I do have a biased take on sidewalks as a whole. I think how the city funds it is bad, and a lot of it is funded by the homeowner and neighborhood as it wraps around the block. While on topic, on additional routes for Missoulians, trails, and making sure that there are options for folks to bike or walk off of the sidewalks and blend those with low traffic areas for their safety. Ross talks about what's considered off-site infrastructure.
There's connectivity language in there that says that that in those instances that the city may require off-site infrastructure to be built at the cost of the developer if it's in proximity to the development. And so another example of this is the Orange Craig roundabout that was funded in half by the development there. Sorry, the Orange Craig intersection traffic light that just went in. Everybody's probably seen it. That's another off-site connectivity requirement that the city put in place. And so again, we're just trying to make this language clear that in certain circumstances, if there's a significant impact to our transportation system, that we could be requiring things.
And, speaking of just basic infrastructure, just not getting too off topic, but if you've ever seen those pedestrian lights where you hit the button and the lights flash for people crossing, that's been very successful in the city of Missoula. We've only been really implementing that for the last couple, less than 5 years now. And, there's many places in Missoula where you might think is okay, where would be a good place to put these lights? One example would clearly be between the Poverello Center and the other side of the street. You got West Broadway. Not to mention you have that light next to Yolks, which used to be a whole bunch of different grocery stores at the time, as the main crossing point, and then further up where you have it kind of near California Street Bridge, maybe one or two more crossings in between, but nothing that hits a button where the light flashes. So that would be considered like an infrastructure project for trails and other things to help improve. So example-wise. So as we go a little bit forward in this meeting, creating driveways that don't require payments in an attempt to be in compliance with Missoula air quality, with more options for multiple surface material types. They opened up for questions and clarity for council, and Ross talks about sidewalk requirements and how to get out of it if you are a developer. So this is kind of for folks, especially developers, developing sites and stuff like that, where they may not need to put in sidewalks, and Ross talks about some of the examples.
In the manual, we do have a design exception process where people can apply for a design exception. Let's say our requirements say that you have to do these right-of-way improvements, but like I said, you're at the end of a cul-de-sac road and there's no sidewalk within half a mile, and there's really no benefit to this, and maybe there's a ditch there and it's going to be very, very expensive, and there's very little public benefit. I think we would be able to look, the applicant can submit a design exception process. We wanted to maintain that kind of flexibility, so there's so many circumstances where these things don't make sense to a reasonable person when you put them on paper, but then there's all these eventualities. And so I think we just wanted to maintain some level of flexibility and judgment call for how we apply some of these standards, and that will be documented in this design exception.
All right, and then a big part of it, kind of hearkening back to, what he was mentioning in terms of cul-de-sacs and some of those more rural areas, which don't have much foot traffic in general and just have streets that people use to, they have kids that ride on bikes, all that kind of stuff. And so sidewalks for there when they have extremely low traffic versus moderate to high traffic, where sidewalks are kind of like, you probably should have sidewalks in there, because when you have people walking on the street, it's a little too close to cars, and you need that extra kind of like raised up area for any kind of eventuality in case like a car swerves off the street. At least the curb will help mitigate them and stop them slightly so they don't cause any more irreversible damage to people walking. So it's important to bring up those because the Unified Development Code is a guideline. Again, this is a guideline, and having the city have this will allow for guided development without discouraging costs, cutting measures. Some developers need to create housing or even work with the city in bringing affordable housing, which they don't require in zoning and code reform currently. Erin P. Housing and Community Planning responds to the affordable housing question like she's repeated it many times, and she has. Like, I've played her clips many times talking about the affordable housing component to Unified Development Code, and this is her response.
Development possible. What we are hearing widely across the development community, that duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, really anything under 7 units in an urban infill capacity is exceptionally difficult, if not impossible, without perfect circumstances, perfectly sized lot, cheap land. If all of those things fall into place, we're seeing some development of this, but we're primarily seeing multifamily development at 13 to 18 units and above, because the larger you scale multifamily development, the more financially feasible it becomes. So gentle infill is a huge component of our land use plan and of our baseline zoning designations, because that's really how we're going to make the most headway in providing more homes and a diversity of more homes across our community in ways that are supported by our existing infrastructure and don't end up costing our community significant money for the creation of new infrastructure and the maintenance of that downstream. And so,
all right. So when you think about it like this, affordable housing, especially for the developer, they have some affordable housing on their development property, and then the other parts of the property are not affordable housing. And so we talk about the disparity of wealth. This is a prime example of creating that disparity of having affordable housing on one half and then having more expensive on the other half. You're essentially having neighbors where one person's like, oh, I spent $250,000 on this condo, and then another person's like, oh, I spent $500,000 on this condo that looks exactly the same as you. What makes you so special? And you can understand that's one example. I don't see it really happening in that regard, but for the most part, a lot of times the lot, the land, the construction, the development, the price tag. The price tag is the biggest thing, because they have to apply to the, organization. Like if you think about it like this, like housing prices isn't just a Missoula thing, it is a national thing, and they've hammered on this as well. And the best way to kind of describe this is that you build a site and you intend to sell it, and yes, the developers got to develop. That's their bottom line. They got to make money. That's just the way it is. But a big part of it too is that the city is trying to be like, oh, you should add more affordability, and then when you overcomplicate it, and the developer's like, hey, I'm going to lose money on this project. Why do I want to even continue this project? Forget this. I'm never coming back here again. And that has a domino effect where then we have no development in the city of Missoula. So that's towing the line between that kind of thing. And having more housing stock is kind of what the city's goal has always been. And so the affordability will come if you build. And that's kind of what their mindset is at this particular point. And then as we go further into this meeting, it wasn't intended to restrict affordable housing, but encourage developers to put less of a burden on other residents to bear the brunt of it all. And while the city went back and forth on this, another topic took over. Bike storage. One thing that most people don't really think about, Missoula is the kind of place where, bikes get stolen quite often, and Aaron Wilson Transportation talks about this.
At a high level, the reason we have required bicycle storage is to accommodate that as a sustainable transportation mode that is part of our overall transportation goals for the city and how we're going to accommodate growth. It's certainly not the only one, despite what I think the conversations sometimes feel like at the city. This is one piece, right? And providing that long-term bicycle storage offers a place that is weather protected, to store the bicycles, promoting use, essentially enabling people to more easily choose to use a bicycle as a means of transportation or recreation.
Yeah, so various different ways to do this, and basically making like a bike cage structure, even if it's very simplistic and everything like that, helps encourage people to use those sites. And while many Missoulians believe getting your bike stolen is a rite of passage, this simply adds a component to include policies as an option to encourage a communal bike garage for storage. You can have a bike lock and that works fine, but it's not the end all be all to all supporting vehicles, just as expensive in some cases as junker cars. Aaron also talks about motivation behind this particular policy, and he has some images to boot.
Necessarily, we haven't always seen adequate bicycle storage, whether that's short-term or long-term, in particular in multifamily developments, true of commercial as well. In fact, we had a bicycle rack program that we funded through my office through a CMAQ grant in order to go out and retrofit older multifamily to add those later, which there are all sorts of challenges with that because there was a higher demand than was actually being provided by those developments. So there's a real importance there. It's a different concept, and frankly, we've had a century of policies and things that have promoted and in fact it made it the easiest mode of travel by vehicle, and we feel like there's a need to have some policy to sort of level the playing field.
And then, a big part of this too, just kind of thinking off the cuff is that with this kind of like special bike storage or even a bike garage that the city can help pay for in different neighborhoods and stuff like that, all you'd have to provide is a piece of mail with your name on it, very much like how you get applied to like city benefits by, going to Currents Aquatic Center, getting a cheaper deal through that, utilizing their swimming pool, maybe make it in a way where, people get access to these bicycling garages at various locations in Missoula, to be able to essentially, just put it in parks. You have bicycle garages in parks, and then you can essentially have the code given to the people who have applied to their city card, which is essentially just having your name on a piece of mail that you get for your place. And so that kind of proves residency and kind of helps encourage that kind of thing. And yeah, it's just like one of those things, this is just kind of speaking off the cuff and just, off the top of my head. And, there's just a lot of different things that we can do. And we have a biking community, and Aaron Wilson dropped the multimodal as the key word for everything transportation, which include bike lanes, trails, general public transit. According to study, more than 50% of Missoulians ride their bike within 30 days during the summer, and sits around 27% during November through February. I wonder why. Not to mention more than 30% of costs come from those who drive regularly compared to other options. 30% of household expenditures comes to some form of transportation, cost of gas and everything to do with that. Your car payments, all those kind of things. You don't really think about those kinds of things for sure, but Emily Armstrong, Community Development, talks about urban zoned areas where it comes to alternative transportation. This has a lot to do with how buildings are placed not in lieu, but in conjunction with sidewalks and connectivity. So, businesses, should they be more applicable and easy to get access to via cars only, or should there be an access point for people just walking up and getting into the store? So without further ado, here is Emily Armstrong.
The urban mixed-use place type is different than the others. This place type is applied to areas like Reserve Street, north of the river. These areas have developed with a strong influence from automobiles, and the urban form isn't designed to be very walkable, and cars are really the preferred choice of transportation in this place type. These areas also have a less connected street grid, which is a major barrier to walkability, and so for that reason, walkability is not a high priority in this place type description. Infrastructure is, of course, a very important component to walkability. That being said, it isn't the only component. For example, Reserve Street does have sidewalks, but it isn't very easy to navigate on foot or on bike. In order to create walkable areas, there has to be a relationship between the public street and building placement and orientation. This is achieved through zoning tools, which are build to zone, build to width, transparency, and street-facing entrances.
And a lot of times, from what I've noticed, especially on Reserve Street, it feels like it's a sidewalk to nowhere, where you're going from long distances to get anywhere, and then you go through intersections that are even more dangerous, especially off Reserve Street. Don't drive on Reserve Street, I say. It's always, if you want to add 15 more minutes to your commute in Missoula, just hop on Reserve Street. You're going to be there a while. Some places, like she mentioned, are hard to comply with since most of the major development had cars in mind when they developed. You know, most cities and towns that were kind of really booming and started growing like crazy in the 40s and 50s had the suburban lifestyle and order where people would drive cars from long distances just to get to the places they need to be. You know, not just so much like the farm kid who had to walk miles to get to school. This is more how, like, a lot of people like the idea of the farm land that got converted into suburbia, no farms. And so the mindset was kind of like, at the time, was very suburban, car centric, and then Reserve Street in those kind of township areas was very much like car centric in mind. So Emily also spoke about this design overlay as it works with buildings on how they connect to sidewalks and access to buildings. And so this is Emily. Let's see.
Over the last 6 years, we have gotten to test these standards, see the successes, and identify issues. The design excellence overlay is going away with the new code. It won't be a zoning overlay, and it won't be an extra process. However, the new code does pull in, reduce, and modify some of the more impactful standards that exist in design excellence. This is Grist Bakery on 3rd Street. It is in the design excellence overlay and complies with the Build 2 zone and Build 2 width. There is a sidewalk, however, it doesn't have a boulevard or street trees. The infrastructure may not be our ideal for walkability, but the street frontage has a very walkable appearance because the building is pulled up towards the public sidewalk.
And so that's a big part of it. Pulled up is the key word for what they're trying to do in terms of trying to mixed use urban areas and having businesses right on the street. So it's kind of like, why don't we make more places like Reserve Street feel like downtown where the buildings come a little bit closer? And a lot of times when the buildings are a little bit closer to the street, traffic actually has a tendency to slow down. It's pretty interesting as zoning essentially is creating access from sidewalks as opposed to parking lot between sidewalks and buildings. Some buildings were built without walkability in mind, and many are reflected in by buildings built and designed from the city's overlay passed back in 2019. They spend a lot of time with buildings, placement of their front door to parking lots and trees. So that was there's quite a bit of back and forth with that for sure, but overall they have these standards in mind, development and redevelopment, which included components to encourage access that feels natural for folks walking and driving to their businesses of choice. Luckily, this was the only committee meeting from today, which had about 10 clips from their city and staff to show more details representing the 4 hours worth of meetings between City Council and Land Use and Planning to about 15-20 minutes of this part of the show. And for more always, you can go to ci.missoula.mt.us for agenda items and webcasts of these minutes and permitting for projects and home improvements. Complaints to the city and their staff as well. Their contacts are online as well. EngageMissoula.com is yet another great resource just to talk about all these upcoming projects in details and have some Q&As and ask project managers exactly what's going on with a lot of these projects, including the SAM project, which they amended to help include some of the reductions and some of the project and design standards to comply with the federal grant to make it move forward. So as we're talking about this, we got some holiday concerts courtesy of the high schools here in town, and we also have another non-holiday related clip for you guys. But without further ado, here are the new programs courtesy of our Media Assistance Grants program.
Believe it or not, my PhD thesis was on how much it costs to do this. I thought heating the brood would be as expensive as flight. Flight is tremendously expensive. Just to give you an idea, if you track the metabolic output of an Olympic level sprinter, a gold medal Olympic level sprinter is producing 1% of the metabolic output necessary for insect flight. Insect flight is extremely expensive. So 2 days after emergence, your muscles are pretty strong, but your chitin is still soft. You're the best person to do that job. Best bee to do that job. What was the original question? Bam!
Steak. Oh, you better watch out. You better not cry. Better not pout. I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming.
Hey guys, welcome back. Let's talk about some movies that are coming out basically throughout the Christmas holidays. There's a bunch of movies, a lot of things happening. And of course, the big blockbuster looking out for is that James Cameron film, Avatar 3, Fire and Ash. So a big part of this has to do with the fact that you got to understand, this guy's been working on these Avatar movies since like the late 90s. The guy's 71 years old. He spent more on his life on this particular franchise than he did on any other thing. And while the last movie was about water and the previous was about, you know, pants and trees, no, plants and trees, mind you, you know, they were wearing pants and not wearing pants towards the end. But I assume the next one will be about caves, underground. We have the bad blue alien fighting against the good ones who have always opposed humans on the planet of Na'vi, which is the Pandora, all that. No, the planet that belonged to the Na'vi, Pandora. Okay. See, it's been so long. It's like one of those movies where you go into it just like, oh, what's going on? I'm sorry, there's too much happening. And so we bring back Sam Worthington and Zoe Zendaya as the Sully family. Plenty of James Cameron cameoed actors in tow. We have a battle not only for the planet, but the soul of their very own gods are not doing the thing that they want them, and therefore they take matters into their own hands. And kind of seems like James Cameron is talking about the rise of atheism in the Na'vi community. So enjoy a movie that promises spectacle over substance unless you're into conservation of fictional people on a fictional planet. So then we got another movie coming out, not necessarily this weekend, but throughout the holiday break, Anaconda. This is basically like one of those Metro meta kind of things going in order since this came out next week. We have Jack Black, the box office draw that he is, because, you know, he was the Minecraft movie. He's Steve. He made so much money through them. It's like one of the most what's that called? The most profitable game movie ever was the Minecraft movie. It's crazy, right? But back again to make a meta movie about the making of an Anaconda movie, only to be stuck in an Anaconda movie with a giant snake that's going after their friends. And the trailer really pretty much just spoiled the whole entire movie as they get in way over their heads in this comedy retelling of a horror movie about a giant snake. And also, Paul Rudd's in this movie for some reason. The housemaid, Sydney Sweeney, is hired by a rich family to be a maid. Well, she's not Sydney Sweeney in the movie, but she's playing a character who plays a maid, or not who plays a maid, but is the maid to this rich family. Things get wild because it's one of those like sexual thrillers that you kind of got from like the late 80s, early 90s, all that kind of stuff. Usually with the husband either has an affair or the wife thinks he has an affair, resulting in the two women fighting over some guy or their way of life, and then the main character gets to fight back. It's kind of rags versus riches yet again. All right, then we got a movie about stand-up comedy. It's called Is This Thing On? It's about a guy who copes with a divorce by turning it into a joke for others to laugh at. There's really not much to say about it except for that. Then we got another SpongeBob movie because for some reason it seems like Nickelodeon sold their soul to the SpongeBob, where they have to require to make a movie every 1 or 2 years. Speaking of unfunny, as SpongeBob is back with their cheap jokes and over 30 demographic referring to the old stuff as the best stuff. Watch as the mainstay characters come back in celebrity cameos. Litter this movie through CGI, Blender-like budget to create a world. And you know, CGI has basically become the shadowing of cartoon movies. So if you ever watch like the Simpsons movie or the Bob's Burger movie, they basically do the regular TV show, but they just add a little bit of layer of dark shadow and contrast to be like, this is movie. That's basically what they did with SpongeBob, except they use CGI. Then we got David, Angel Studios. They're also making a movie called Young Washington, and it's kind of crazy, but David versus Goliath is more or less a Bible retelling of the famous story of David, who used his wits to defeat a big, strong guy and bring hope to the meek who would inherit the world. Sound familiar? Because this story has been told over and over again, and it's a CGI retelling of it through Angel Studios. And, you know, if it was the studio called Angel, you know they're going to be basically making the Bible cinematic universe at this point. Finally, we got a Hugh Jackman movie. It's called Sing Song Blues. You like Neil Diamond? Well, you're not getting Neil Diamond because you're getting this musical biography based on two people who basically covered his songs and became Midwestern famous for doing the whole Sweet Caroline, bum, bum, bum. And I think I read it wrong, but watch as Neil Diamond cover singer fall in love with this counterpart and their journey to bring joy to people through copyright strikes. All right, so those are the movies coming out this weekend. I gotta figure out how to use this with my peripheral vision, but we got new Dubbin Stuff for you guys. It's called Santa Claus, not beyond the realm of possibility, but Santa Claus from the 1953 movie. So here's Dubbin Stuff.
All right, a little bit of a little bit of all sorts of things to make a thing. Gotta put things in, get the flour. This weird thing. Gotta get some more stuff. Yeah. Lot of things. There we go. I'm coming. Here you go, Santa Claus. Very good, my wizard friend. This is no laughing matter, Santa Claus. This kind of concoction will explode you. Oh, what? What? Oh, can you hurry up? Bone in my body breaks when I walk to the anything. Oh, hold on a second. What's going on? Hey, Santa, what am I supposed to get again? I kind of lost the plot. I'm supposed to put this soup in your bag? Well, yeah, kind of, but it's Christmas magic. There's more to than just science. I don't have much time. I left my mouse apprentice to sweep up the old shop down below. A mouse that cleans? Ho, ho, ho. All right, Velma, Daphne, Luigi, Mario. Oh, okay, you'll be fine. He looks like he's dying. No, he's fine. He's perfectly okay. They're just next to the plants. They had quite the rager last night. They're my pollinators. I gotta pollinate my flowers, and, moths are 10 to 1 to bees, so they're great. My bones are glass. So you get everything you needed? Geez, Santa, you got other things you gotta work on? Not really. The elves are doing most of the work. It's kind of hard to sustain an economy based on one day, but whatever. If Mariah Carey can do it, so can I. You know how she always says, all I want for Christmas is you? Well, I like to change it and say, all I wanted for Christmas is, you know what I'm going to say. I read the HR memo. You're indispensable. Oh, there you go. All right. All the way up to the top of the bag. But yeah, we really need to talk about your behavior. Well, it's a simple joke. Weird Al does it all the time. Why do I have to get punished for all the little things I say? Yeah, I get it. Being old and funny is controversial. Oh, please stop talking. You're not making it any easier for me to keep you on board. No. Well, it is Christmas, and I don't really want to cause any drama, so... How would you like some cookies from Mrs. Claus? Gluten-free? We'll feed the gluten to the reindeer. No, but I want the gluten. Oh, was that a trick question? Oh, man. All right, get ready for some jump cut magic. See this? This is a flower. It can bloom anywhere and everywhere. All right, back to brewing my brewskis now. La 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 la. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I forgot to ask him for Madagascar vanilla bean. Ah, that's terrible. I should bring him back. Come back! Come back! It's okay, I can wait. Oh, I heard of stop and smell the roses, but not disappear and enjoy the roses, but yes, very good idea. Ha ha ha. Keep up the good work.
Hey guys, welcome back. Let's talk about some news that are happening just leading up into the end of the year. There isn't too much I want to talk about in terms of events and upcoming things. I do wanted to mention as well is that, the New Year's event is happening here at the Missoula Public Library. It will be closed basically Wednesday and Thursday next week because of, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Then we got New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And then New Year's Eve, the library is technically closed, but the building is open for this particular event called Missoula on Main, which used to be the First Night Missoula, which is one of those things to celebrate the New Year's, having all these events, all these kind of things happening in and across the city of Missoula. The library will be hosting something from 12 to 4 p.m. MCAT will be hosting our Winter Days camp just before the New Year's. So from the 29th to the 31st of December, MCAT will be hosting our camp. We have a full camp. It's going to be a fun time. And technically, MCAT will be closed essentially after the 27th of December, which will be our last Saturday before the new year. So 27th essentially will be the last day that will be open to the public. All right, for the year, those kind of like, see you next year jokes, all that kind of stuff. So you can use those as we're getting closer to the end. All right, wind, and more wind this week. And while many of us might have been really awakened to strong winds around 8:30 Wednesday morning, we're trucking along with damages being fairly minimal compared to the July storms of 2024. Many of the reports and everything were bringing this up, so I might as well too. Some people lost their power more than once, with some returning within minutes. We had the leaning power lines of reserve streets happening. Eaton Street had some down power lines towards Benson's farm from when I saw driving to work. Reddit posted some aftermaths too, with down trees over a van off Broadway by the Lifelong Learning Center. Sorry, 3rd Street. Belt, Montana turned over a semi-truck. Fort Harrison lost some trees. There's some footage even on Reddit showing a semi-truck being turned over by some of the strong winds. Power outages through the state included large areas west and central, with much of the southeast Montana not having reported outages in and around Miles City for miles. A lot of schools are getting close to closing. Today is the last day of school for a lot of MCPS schools here in town. Libby took advantage of these storms by closing their schools until the next year, essentially. Reddit also posted wind meters who knew we needed that, but gusts up to 69.3 miles per hour going west, and the average being about 50 miles per hour throughout this day. Jefferson School's roof was blown off and they were rerouted to many other schools, so they didn't get the Libby treatment of just canceling the schools, so this kids still had to go to school somewhere else. Sorry, kids. NBC Montana reported power outages across Missoula County, including Frenchtown, Cedar Lake, Lolo, Florence, Clinton, Tura, and Bonner areas. Beck said, one of the officials said Northwestern Energy and Missoula Electric Cooperative were assessing damages and working to restore services as quickly as possible. So if you have a power outage, you can always go to the Google, talk about power outages, and they'll show you a map of power outages and some of the process that they got going on currently. Not too bad. Since a week to the day, downtown University dealt with another power outage as a result of wind knocking down a tree off a power line and a transformer explosion near the Thunderbird Hotel. You know, as we're talking about major weather and windstorms, homeless folks are out of most shelters in town, and every year the City of Missoula and Poverello Center hosts a Homeless Person Memorial Day. And so the memorial official date is the 21st, but the day in which they're going to be reading the names of people we've lost this last year will be read at Caris Park starting at 5:30 p.m. Montana Free Press reported shortfalls for housing within shelter services for domestic abuse survivors. The YWCA made the news, and so far, as reports claim, the Meadowlark, built a couple years back, not only has hit capacity multiple times, but folks are staying longer as a result of lack of affordability housing options. Barriers like poor credit and or sketchy rental history can make it more difficult for domestic violence survivors to find affordable housing. I knew somebody who basically lived out of their car for only 7 months, but they had to put down a triple deposit just to get into a rental by themselves. The nonprofit has limited resources to assist with housing, and the organization's rental assistance program is at risk of losing funding next year due to changes in federal policy, according to the YWCA. Usually stays up our 60-day limit, but can be extended. Children's shelters have jumped from 34 to 95 in the last 3 years alone. Shelter beds in the main building serve up to 115 beds, with a pathway shelter serving 47 beds with 12 additional beds in the overflow dorms. They also serve an entirety of Missoula County, which also includes smaller communities from Lolo, Frenchtown, and Seeley Lake. So when it comes to those whole, like, they're bushing from out of town, it's like, yeah, because Missoula is one of the few places that has services in the surrounding areas. The average length of stay at the Pathways shelter has increased from 21 days in 2020 to 48 days in 2025. According to the organization, a lack of access to housing, limited childcare options, low-paying jobs, limited legal resources, mental health. You know, you're paying rents here in Missoula for $1,600 a month on average, so it's kind of ridiculous. They provide services, and often women in these positions struggle with long-term housing options while they have to deal with work with families up to 2 years as they set up apartments for those families. While the number are increasing, they're 75% success. They have a 75% success rate, offers housing within 6 months. Funding shortfalls are a part of the frustration as they received $413,565 federal grants this year to run this program throughout the end of the year of August, but it's unclear whether the organization will see funding for next year. It's hard out there, and these kinds of services are tested more in times where everyone else is being tested financially. The state environment laws are also being tested, and the lawsuit states that House Bill 285 291 and Senate Bill 222 passed through the 2025 legislative process. Basically says that the MEPA is a tool for assessing environmental impacts without regulatory teeth. MEPA, by narrowing the scope of review proximate environmental impacts and defining proposed actions as excluding upstream, downstream, and other direct action that occurs independently or is caused in part or exclusively by the proposed action. So that's overly complicating situations where regulatory can be like, well, we don't need to. And the third challenge is HB 291 by Representative Greg Alblander of Billings prohibited the state from adopting more stringent standards on air pollutants than federal governments, hence regulation is laxed. The motivation behind this has to do with the fact that many policies passed by the state have shown the legislature has not had the people's best interests, and hope the Montana Supreme Court upholds the Constitution in those regards for a clean and livable environment. You know, how about the, like, I hate to talk about this, but the violence in the last week alone has been crazy between Rob Reiner and his wife slain by the main subject, their own son, Nick. Brown University shooting where I haven't heard the manhunt still going on. Who knows? Australia, the big celebration on Bondi Beach was interrupted by a father-son shooter that killed more than 15 people. It's insane. Just a lot of things just happening in and around the world today. But I'm going to leave on a lighter note, talking about some bears and bear mitigation tools, which apparently Fish, Wildlife, and Park have been looking to implement and trying to figure out ways to essentially curb bear just in essentially areas of residents and people. And so what they've figured out is that drones have been able to mitigate the amount of basically bears are scared of drones. Like a guy was talking about how shotguns barely did anything to curb the bear, but drones, since they're relatively new and the bears aren't aware of it, they've discovered that with the footage I'm about to show you, is that bears are just generally just running away from drones. They're just completely and utterly just baffled by this new technology to a point where even Fish, Wildlife, and Park are looking to utilize drones as a way to get close without getting hurt. There's a lot of potential process with this, but essentially these drones are going to be made to catch and follow bears a little bit further down, see as the bear's just running away, just in general from the drone. Doesn't really understand what's going on. I mean, perhaps at some point the bears will be habituated to the idea of drones and the drone will no longer be a thing, but the clip was courtesy of Montana Public Radio, and the whole story is courtesy of Edward F. O'Brien, who wrote a nice piece on it for Montana Public Radio. And so a nice note to kind of end on. So if you have a bear problem, get the drone sound. They might not like it. So for Wake Up Missoula, I'm Scott Ramp. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and happy holidays.